Tonight, a new targeted treatment for Canadians with debilitating obsessive-compulsive disorder.
I didn't feel safe in my own brain.
The non-invasive brain surgery using ultrasound beams instead of an incision.
I think this could be life-changing for a lot of people.
The promising technology to help improve quality of life. Tornado touchdown. The concerning trends across the country.
In Ontario and in Quebec, there's been quite a bit of activity.
The Oilers earn a chance to make hockey history.
Going into Game 7, both teams are going to be very desperate.
One win away from the Cup coming back to Canada.
We want the Cup! We want the Cup!
Plus, determined to do art differently.
My life didn't end, it changed.
After the accident, the BC woman inspiring others as she masters painting with her mouth.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Good evening. Hundreds of thousands of Canadians are living with OCD, obsessive-compulsive disorder. More than just bothersome worries, it's a form of anxiety and can be debilitating for some. Tonight, we're getting an inside look at a promising brain surgery without the scalpel that's changing lives. CTV's Avis Favreau with this exclusive story on one of the Canadians treated using this new approach.
We all like being clean, but for those with OCD, like Rima Youssef, it becomes a dangerous obsession. As she used harsh bleach wipes on her face and washed for hours to calm irrational fears of contaminants.
It felt as serious as if I touch this food, my family will get sick and they might die or something will happen to them and that's going to be my fault.
The symptoms started at age 6. By 19, they were overwhelming. She rarely left this bedroom in her parents' basement.
I didn't feel safe in my own brain. I couldn't pet my dog. I couldn't hug my family. I couldn't go to work. I couldn't go to school.
Medications and therapy didn't help. Desperate, she signed up for a new kind of brain surgery. There are no incisions because it uses focused ultrasound beams to burn 2 small regions in the brain linked to OCD.
This band of white.
And those are the 8-millimeter burn marks left in Rima's brain. With about 30 OCD patients so far, Canadian doctors report up to 60% show significant improvements.
We've seen patients go from essentially being housebound, individuals who had to quit school, had to quit their jobs, and a year or 2 years after the procedure, they're back at school, they're back at work.
2 years after her treatment, Rima is living her life, working full-time in mental health care. The fears are gone.
It's black and white. I feel like I have my life again and things are so different. I mean, there's so many opportunities.
Doctors now want to expand its use.
From our perspective, we're ready to use this in as many patients with treatment-resistant OCD that we could potentially offer this to.
But an Ontario Health Committee recommended against funding this treatment for wider use, saying it isn't ready for prime time, blaming a small number of cases treated with uncertainty in the clinical benefit. And that surprises some specialists who treat severe OCD.
It's fair enough for people to look and say 30 patients is not a big sample, but if it does help and they have the information from the data they've collected on who specifically has been assisted, then you can scale that research.
In fact, doctors in Calgary have started a similar program.
I think this could be life-changing for a lot of people.
Rima, meanwhile, says she wants to push Ontario to expand the treatment, the one that gave her back her life. Avis Favreau, CTV News, Toronto.
A state of emergency along the north shore of Quebec has been extended as several forest fires approach. 1,000 people from 3 regions near the town of Port Cartier have been forced to flee. There are 4 fires in the area, including one just 13 kilometers from the town, which is roughly 600 kilometers northeast of Quebec City. People north of Toronto took shelter when the weather took a drastic turn today near Canadian Forces Base Borden. Historically, that region is familiar with fierce and destructive storms. Pathways Canadian researchers are examining to learn more about tornadoes and where they're touching down most often across the country. CTV's Christina Tenalia explains.
What the heck is that?
An ominous sign today in Angus, just north of Toronto, a week after the community was under a tornado watch.
Big tornado forming overhead!
Storm chaser Aaron Jajak captured these powerful clouds last year, funneling into Didsbury, Alberta. The prairies used to top the list for Canada's tornado hotspot, particularly Saskatchewan, but not anymore.
We just keep getting a better idea of what Canada's at.
Professor David Sills tracks Canadian tornadoes, and he says there's a new contender.
Lo and behold, it's Ontario that comes up on top.
The Northern Tornadoes Project reviewed a 30-year period from 1980 to 2009, reporting an average of 17.4 tornadoes per year in Saskatchewan. But the most recent 30-year analysis provides a new perspective, with Ontario edging past their western counterpart at 18.2 tornadoes per year, compared to Saskatchewan's 14. The cause?
Oh my God!
Is not climate change, it's capturing.
A lot of this is because we are capturing more of those tornadoes that are occurring in Northern Ontario that weren't being captured before.
Meaning an uptick in the yearly Canadian stats.
Now, I would say the number is closer to maybe 100 to 130, as opposed to maybe 70 or 80. It's warmer, and that certainly can provide the fuel for causing these things, but it's more the technology that has driven the numbers to be up.
This climatologist flags there's evidence of tornadoes moving further east, too, with the Ottawa area being one new hotspot.
Waiting for this area of...
Connor Mockett is a storm chaser from Ottawa. He thinks changing geographical data should signal a more specific weather alert system.
There's a rotating thunderstorm 50 kilometers to your east. If you're 50 kilometers the other way, you're still getting the warning, but the storm is so far away from you that the warning means nothing.
So these tornadoes are popping up in places that people have not traditionally expected them to be, meaning another concern, the resiliency of buildings. It may be time for some jurisdictions, like regions in Ontario, to reconsider and reassess the strength of their structures. Heather.
Christina, thank you. A highway in the BC interior has reopened after a pair of crashes left one person dead and more than a dozen injured. The first crash sent a bus carrying elementary school students off the highway and down an embankment. The accident triggered another collision that killed a pedestrian. 7 people were taken to hospital by air ambulance, and another 7 were transported by ground ambulance. Murder charges have been laid in a quadruple shooting north of Toronto that killed an adult and a 2-year-old child. A 41-year-old man is facing 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. Neighbors left in shock by what happened close to home.
It is very sad. That's all I can say. I'm a very emotional person when it comes on children and family.
Police say the suspect knew the victims, but the relationship was not disclosed. Parliamentarians are pushing for more protections as they're faced with a growing toxicity towards public figures. Just this week, a video appears to show a man spitting on a Liberal MP who was previously a target of death threats. Here's CTV's Colton Prale.
Disturbing interactions like this one are raising concerns as MPs head home for the summer circuit. This week, Liberal MP Marco Mendicino spit on by a man who approached him outside a government building in Ottawa.
I am really fed up with the way in which public seems to feel that they can abuse MPs.
Last year, a 44-year-old was arrested for making death threats against MP Tim Lewis, while parliamentarians of all stripes have had their offices vandalized, even firebombed, and protests occur on the Justice Minister's front door. Intelligence reports say threats against politicians are becoming increasingly normalized and often target women.
We've had to follow up with police.
It's why many MPs like Lindsay Matheson now carry panic buttons.
I do have to worry about my family. I do have to worry about others in my circle. So it is in the back of your mind.
The head of the RCMP wants more legal tools to protect parliamentarians.
Offenses, aggravating factors are potential, not remedies, but tools that we can put in the criminal code.
But the Justice Minister isn't biting. In a statement, his office writing the criminal code addresses threats and intimidation and highlighting the possibility of new hate crime legislation through the Online Harms Act. The rise in threats has more MPs like Jagmeet Singh and Melissa Lantsman being assigned police protection. One Liberal MP says she's not seeking re-election as a result of harassment she's faced. Heather.
All right, Colton, thank you. New Democrats in Alberta have chosen former Calgary Mayor Naheed Nenshi as their next leader.
Please join me in welcoming the new leader of the Alberta NDP, Naheed Nenshi.
Nenshi says his focus is on returning the party to power in the next provincial election in 2027.
We need to convert this movement into something that is going to build and build and build and build.
Nenshi replaces outgoing leader Rachel Notley, who stepped down after almost a decade at the helm of Alberta's NDP. She led the party to a majority government in 2015. The Edmonton Oilers were at one point long shots to stage an improbable Stanley Cup comeback against the Florida Panthers. Suddenly, they've shown the strength of true champions and now are only one victory away from rewriting history. CTV's Kamal Karmali on the team's new stats.
Down the ice, there's another.
And with that, the Edmonton Oilers have written a new chapter in hockey history.
They will Monday night play a one-game showdown,
tying their Stanley Cup final series against the Florida Panthers after losing their first 3 games.
We won the cup!
A story so unbelievable.
This is the best day of my life. I love the Edmonton Oilers.
Because it hasn't been seen in nearly 8 decades.
Once in all that time, that's pretty rare.
Friday's win by the Edmonton Oilers was the first time a team had come all the way back from down 3-0 to force a Game 7 in the Stanley Cup final since 1945. Back then, the Detroit Red Wings fell behind to the Toronto Maple Leafs, but Detroit won 3 straight to tie it up. It was the Leafs, though, who won Game 7, putting an end to the Red Wings' near-miraculous run. But 3 years earlier, the NHL saw the one and only team ever to mount a complete comeback in a Stanley Cup final. It was the same 2 teams, except it was the Maple Leafs who trailed 3-0, but won 4 straight games to win hockey's holy grail.
It's much more difficult now just because you have 4 rounds of best-of-7 playoffs.
Here at the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto, a hope by fans to have a shot at seeing a near impossible feat in their lifetime.
Honestly, I didn't think they could do it.
A hope that even has visiting Americans jumping on the bandwagon.
Let's bring the cup back to Canada, you know?
This Oilers team will already be remembered by historians for tying this series, but analysts say if they're able to win Game 7 Monday night, not only will they be remembered, but firmly cemented as one of the greatest teams of all time. Heather.
The countdown to the cup is on. Kamal, thank you. Coming up, measuring Canada's size and economic scale.
The total size of an economy doesn't tell you very much about kind of the economic well-being of the people in that economy.
Rethinking the relationship between population growth and the economy. Plus, a life-altering accident inspires an artistic rebirth. As the Israel-Hamas war stretches into its 9th month, Palestinian officials say at least 39 people were killed by Israeli airstrikes today across northern Gaza. Rescue workers scrambled to find survivors beneath the rubble west of Gaza City. Israel says its fighter jets struck 2 Hamas military sites in the area, but did not elaborate. In Tel Aviv, protesters clashed with police. Demonstrators are demanding Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu resign and are calling on the government to accept a ceasefire deal in exchange for hostages held by Hamas. In Montreal, a group of pro-Palestinian protesters set up a new encampment, the first in a public space in the city. A prominent statue of Queen Victoria was vandalized. The encampment is situated near one of Canada's largest pension fund managers, where demonstrators are demanding the CDPQ divest billions from dozens of companies they say have ties to the conflict. Well, Canada surpassed a new population threshold just 10 months after reaching 40 million. It's estimated more than 41 million people now call the country home, and it's impacting everything from the country's housing crisis to the economy. CTV's Adrian Gabriel on measuring our size and scale.
Canada's population boom has long been pitched as an economic necessity.
Adding more people to a population make that GDP, the total economic pie, bigger? The answer to that question is unambiguously yes.
Though some economists believe that we must dig deeper to garner a more fulsome monetary picture.
Because, of course, the total size of an economy doesn't tell you very much about kind of the economic well-being of the people in that economy.
Professor Mikhail Skuderud recently co-authored this peer-reviewed study on Canadian immigration levels, which will be released in the upcoming Canadian Journal of Economics. He's found that on a per capita basis, there's been virtually no growth over the last 7 years.
The surge in growth in Canada's population in recent years is at least contributing to the decline in GDP per capita. This government is moving away from a skilled immigration system to an immigration system that's focused on trying to plug holes in lower skilled labor markets.
Canada added nearly 250,000 people to its population in the first 3 months of this year, mainly through immigration. More than 130,000 are temporary residents. Concerns are being shared that an influx in the population without the economic payoff could further divide Canadians.
Can we integrate them into the labor force? I think we are running the risk of decreasing or seeing further erosion of that support for immigration. We have to change how we think and how we absorb new immigrants, or we change the number that come into the country while still being a welcoming country.
This is all playing out during a housing crisis across much of the country. The federal government has announced a plan to cap the number of temporary residents at 5% of Canada's population. Currently, it's sitting at approximately 6.8%. Adrian Gabriel, CTV News, Toronto.
Still ahead, a shrinking player pool. Parents reconsidering their financial game plan to help keep their kids in hockey. Excelling at Canada's beloved pastime is hard. Paying for hockey, even harder for parents. Fewer Canadian children are sticking it out, with the high costs keeping many off the ice. CTV's Garrett Berry explains.
Hockey's off-season just keeps getting shorter. Already, manufacturers are shipping next year's new gear to stores across the country.
Years ago, it would be August, but now it's, June, July.
So we asked this sports store in St. John's to give us a shopping list for a child brand new to the game, wanting to get started on the ice.
You need top to bottom, jocks, shins, pants, skates, chest protector, elbows, neck guard, helmet, gloves, stick, and a bag.
Starter kits sell much of that gear, but not everything.
So the starter kits start at $139, and the additional items are about $160 to $170. So you'd be in the $300, $350 range.
So that's the cost of the very first shift. But then there's yearly registration, ice time, and new equipment as kids keep growing. To be the next McDavid, Draisaitl, or Kachuk, it's an expensive endeavor. With 3 children playing the sport and a willingness to pursue high-level play, one Newfoundland hockey coach says spending can quickly rack up.
If you play the AAA level, the highest level that you can play here in the province, just travel, registration fees, gear, everything, you're looking at least 10 grand per kid.
Canada is growing, but Canada's game is not. Registration in organized leagues nationwide is down, about 550,000 at last count, compared to 634,000 a decade ago. Some groups are hoping to turn the tide, like Hockey for Youth, that offers free-of-charge programs across the country to new Canadians and disadvantaged families. No experience or gear required.
They step out on the ice and they fall for the first time and they get back up. That in and of itself tells me that it's not the kids that don't want to play, it's the accessibility and the delivery models that need to change.
Those barriers are the ones leaving parents to make the tough call whether to keep their kids in the game they love. Garrett Berry, CTV News, St. John's.
After the break, focused on the future while finding a new way to reconnect with the world. Finally for us tonight, the remarkable rise of a BC woman who survived a life-changing accident, only to find a creative way to give back. As CTV's Adam Sawatsky tells us, she's hoping to inspire people to move forward in life despite the challenges we face.
For as long as she can recall, Deborah Kessler's been inspired by the natural world.
It's awesome. It's beautiful.
It's maybe why her younger self climbed on this couch to pose with flowers on the wall, before wishing for a Christmas gift to draw in her sketchbook.
And I love drawing animals. That's my big thing.
Although she grew up to work as an archaeologist and nurse, Deborah always found comfort sketching outside.
It's calming.
Until that day on the farm that couldn't have been more traumatizing.
I was in so much shock, I don't remember it.
But Deborah will never forget how the doctors told her family the farm equipment accident had caused such debilitating internal and external injuries she likely wouldn't survive 24 hours.
I had a doctor ask me before I went into surgery, what was the one thing I wanted to live for? And I said, because I have kids.
The single mother of 3 and first-time grandma ended up spending 6 weeks in a coma and 7 months in hospital before returning home, leaving both arms behind.
Where do I go from here? Like, what do I do now?
Who am I?
Yeah.
While she struggled to answer those questions for almost a decade, her community of kids, care workers, and Indigenous elders encouraged her to find a way to reconnect with the world.
My life didn't end, it changed. And because my life changed, I accept those changes and move forward with them.
Well, Deborah persevered, determined to do art differently, and mastered painting with her mouth before earning a degree in fine arts and being accepted into national and international art associations.
I think I'm better than I was before.
Than before the accident.
How does that feel? Awesome.
Which is why Deborah so gratefully gives back now. From sharing her talents with youth in the classroom to volunteering for donors at Canadian Blood Services clinics.
If it wouldn't have been for that blood that people had donated, I wouldn't be here today.
And instead of mourning for what was, Deborah's focused on embracing what is.
There's enough ugly things in this world. I love beauty and I love reflecting beauty. And I want my artwork to make people happy.
Adam Sawatsky, CTV News, Souk.
An inspiring story. That is our show for this Saturday night. I'm Heather Butts. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. Good night, and I'll see you again tomorrow.